Everybody, and today we're checking out the horrors of Pentagon's new UFO files. This is by the legendary and, in my opinion, the best military journalist on YouTube, Cappy Army. Chris over at Cappy Army. I'm very excited for this one, especially because it's like the two subjects that I genuinely love: the military and UFOs. If you know me, you know me. My audio is really quiet. I'm sorry. If you know me, you know how much I love this stuff. I love talking about the spooky conspiracies that Lockheed Martin are keeping crashed aircraft and they're doing reverse engineering, and I've read the books. I love all that stuff. I love it. The fact that Cappy Army, who I watch for my military stuff, is talking about UFOs, mate, this is going to be a good one. 33 minutes long. Sit yourself down, fill up your chug. 10% off, link down below. People are buying these like crazy, and they're loving them as well, which I'm really happy for. We're going to watch this. We're going to enjoy it. Link down below to Cappy Army's video. By the way, if you're not subscribed to Cappy Army and you watch my videos, I think there's something going on there. You need to go over there. It's at 837,000 subscribers. Let's bump that up as much as we can. Let's talk about chug real quick before we get started. Literally the best drinking vessel you can get. This will last you a lifetime if you look after it. I am so fed up of buying cheap crap that falls apart after a season or a year. Things that you get from Walmart or Target in America or Tesco's or Asda here in the UK. Stuff that falls apart after a couple uses and just feels like cheap shit. This is not one of them. This will literally last you, as long as you look after it, a lifetime. The metal part, so a lot of tankers are just made of wood and the wood swells after a while. The metal part comes out and you can put it unscrews and you can put it in the dishwasher. It's sick. And free customization and a free bag to protect it when you take it camping with the boys because you want to keep your beer cold around the fire. And it ships to America. Link down below. Also, if you're in the UK, check out My Business Morale if you want a healthy energy drink utilizing functional mushrooms. We are selling out quick. Get yourself one right now. All right, I'm excited for this. I can't put my headphones on properly still, guys, because my incredible... I'm going to keep showing it off. My incredible Hobbit tattoo of Sting is still healing. So if I look like a fool with the way I put my headphones on, it's not my fault. All right, let's pull this up. Let's put subbies on. Let's talk about UFOs.
The Pentagon just released their fifth and most insane batch of UFO files yet, declassifying hundreds of documents and videos from the FBI, CIA, and State Department onto their website, which claims that these UFOs are now increasingly becoming a national security threat. The disclosure from this newest August 2026 release that you need to know about comes from a Special Forces live fire training event that happened over the Gulf of Oman in 2021.
Holy shit, that's where I was.
States, quote, the AC-130 gunship observed two approximately 4-foot diameter cold orbs between 0 to 20 feet above the surface of the water, and the aircraft clocked their maneuvering speed at 1,300 miles per hour. No means of propulsion were observed. So for context, that means that these objects were moving as fast as a fighter jet, while at the same time maneuvering impossibly quick with hair-point turns.
Okay, before we get into this, because obviously it's a long video and I don't want to pause it a bunch, I want, if you're watching this from a standpoint that you don't really know much about UFO stuff, right? Take away the stigmatism of UFO aliens. Just take that away for a moment, okay? And think about this objectively. Pilots are observing something they can't explain, and it's not our tech. That alone, just that sentence alone should be raising concerns. You can throw the other fun stuff in, interdimensional aliens that live in the sea and all this really wacky cool stuff. That's cool, right? That's fun. That's the fun side of this. The serious side of this is the fact that we don't know what this is, and so we don't know how to protect ourselves from it. It's a national security threat. That's what it is. And so that alone, take the stigmatism away, that alone should be raising concerns.
Something was doing circles around our best weapon systems out there, because the report states the AC-130 combat systems officer then fired his 105mm cannon at the UAP, but the UAP rapidly flew away during the slight delay between when he pulled the trigger and the cannon's recoil.
Wow.
Almost as if the UAP knew that the shot was coming. But an even more shocking account from the file release comes to us from a US pilot who reported seeing a strange, massive triangle-shaped craft that blocked out the stars over Afghanistan in 2002.
Wow.
He said in the release files, quote, at approximately 4:30 a.m. local time, Redacted noticed that the stars were getting blacked out over Bagram. It appeared as if something huge went overhead,
wow,
from west to east, and was an equilateral triangle shape. The object was moving silently, at a consistent speed and altitude, possibly 150 knots, with no lights visible. He went on to say that he estimated it was 500 feet in size, but he could not fully see the shape of the object.
Wow.
The story was corroborated by another pilot that was there with him. And for context, that's massive. It's like a 50-story building laid on its side, or a football field and a half in size, this craft up in the sky.
That's insane.
No wonder they waited over 2 decades to declassify that story.
Yeah.
Because it sounds totally insane. But these reports remind me of the kind of stories that me and the guys would trade when we were killing time during our deployment in Iraq.
100,000,000%. This is the type of shit that you and the boys talk about in the military. Like, we had fun talking about this stuff, talking about our theories and all this other stuff. And the thing is, I think military lads are more open to this because you do see weird shit all the time. And it's not only that, like, you get, like, told not to do certain things all the time. And that alone is, like, weird. There was stuff that I remember, like, see, this is the thing, like, I want to say stuff, but I don't know what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not allowed to say. But I remember, like, being in certain areas in the military, and you would walk past a room, and it was like, you are not allowed to even look in that room. Do not look in that room. Now, you might be like, yeah, that could be just intel, right? It could be just intel. And it probably was for the most part. But that gets the lads talking. And then before you know it, you're a couple bevies deep on a run ashore, and you're talking about all these different theories. Do you know what I mean?
And that's what's always fascinated me, is just how much in common these encounters seem to have. Almost everyone knows somebody who has a story. Some of the stories might have routine explanations, others can be explained by foreign adversaries, but there are still incidents that fall outside of these explanations. From the war in Ukraine to the global war on terror, I want to investigate the most credible reports from the UFO files, including...
I am so down for this tangent Capiami's going on.
Bizarre metallic jellyfish invading our skies, strange beings appearing on thermals at nuclear sites, to something draining animals' blood at US installations all across America. But the next story is even more bizarre, I think, and it comes to us from the war in Ukraine. One night in February 2024,
oh wow,
Ukrainian artillery troops were scanning the battlefield looking for Russian enemies with a DJI Mavic drone when something strange appeared on their thermal display. Suspended above the horizon was a dark, elongated object. It had no immediately recognizable wings, no rotors or tail, and it appeared almost motionless as the drone operator watched. The footage was attributed to Ukraine's 406th Separate Artillery Brigade and quickly spread online, being reported widely, including in Newsweek. In the recordings, the soldiers sound just as confused as everyone who later watched it. One jokingly asks why the object isn't firing missiles at them, which is a reasonable concern when you're fighting a war where practically everything in the sky eventually tries to kill you.
That's
the
true.
Object's actual distance was impossible to determine from the video alone. It could have been a relatively small object nearby, or something enormous much further away. And as a former infantryman, I'm legally required to say at this point that estimating range by staring at something on a screen is exactly how confident people end up being confidently wrong.
Yeah, it's so true.
Here is where the story becomes even stranger. In 2025, 3 Ukrainian researchers then published an analysis of the footage by estimating that the object was approximately 88 kilometers from the drone and 8 kilometers above the ground. They calculated that it traveled roughly 14 kilometers in 17 seconds. An insane 800 meters per second, or around Mach 2.5. Their broader research suggests that some dark objects detected over Ukraine could measure several kilometers across. In dummy, Barney-style terminology that I can understand, Ukraine filmed a floating island moving faster than the speed of sound, or somebody made a very consequential mistake when estimating the range.
Yeah.
The second possibility can't be ignored, and astrophysicist Avi Loeb had previously challenged similarly extraordinary conclusions from the same Ukraine research program. His argument was by overestimating the distance, an ordinary nearby object can suddenly look like a gigantic craft traveling at an impossible speed. So his criticism concerned earlier observations, not this specific footage, but the same basic problem applies here, because without a reliable distance measurement, every other math calculation becomes questionable.
Do you know what's really shit about this? Is the more advanced AI gets, the more we're not going to be able to tell what's real or not on the internet. So you won't be able to say that anything you see on the internet is viable anymore. And so you won't know if any of this footage, like back in the day, if you saw this, you'd be like, what is that? These days, people are like, it could be AI. And that's shit, that, isn't it?
I once watched an entire squad in Iraq argue over whether a distant object was a person, a bush, or a cow. It was a cow. So I'm reluctant to declare that a thermal silhouette is an alien battleship without a little more supporting evidence. But years into one of the most heavily surveilled wars in human history, nobody has produced a conclusive explanation for exactly what those Ukrainian troops were looking at that day.
Well, I'm surprised more than anything with that one that there weren't more eyes in the sky. That's the one I'm more interested with. That, like, there should have been more intel, really.
Most credible encounter I could find in the Pentagon's UFO files comes from late 2025, very recently, from the second batch of files that were released. The location is still classified, and the report was written by an unnamed, anonymous senior U.S. intelligence officer whose identity still remains a secret, but for the purposes of this story recounting it, we'll call him Lieutenant Carl. And what you're looking
in 2025
at right here is his actual sworn statement made to the U.S. government and released publicly on the Department of War website. The event is a UFO invasion of the U.S. government weapons test range, as we'll see, because according to his recently declassified intelligence report, our senior intelligence officer, Lieutenant Carl, had been dispatched to a weapons test range somewhere in the United States, likely in the Nevada test range or the Utah training range or White Sands. But Lieutenant Carl...
No way, I've been to White Sands. There's a military base right there, and it's stunning, by the way, but it's weird. It's really hard. So the route I took, we went from Colorado. We drove all the way down to White Sands. Wait, did we? Is that the route we took? Yeah, we went from Colorado down to White Sands, and then we went to Tucson. Then we went to Yuma, and then we went to Phoenix. So we drove literally around this whole area, and it's vast. Like it is. It's hard to explain to people who haven't been to America how vast it is. Like here in Europe, it's really hard to go, anywhere where you're not within civilization within 5-10 minutes. But we're talking middle of nowhere for hours. It's insane. There was a road that goes from the White Sands, actually, to Tucson. And I shit you not, I was on this road driving in a straight line for a day. And it was just desert. And we stopped at I remember taking a left turn off this road, driving for 10 minutes. And then there was this RV site that was really cool. And it had exotic birds and stuff. And then the next day we just got back on the road and cracked onto Tucson. Around this area. It was all around here, this exact area. But White Sands here, this missile range, you can go and visit it. It's stunning. In fact, I'll show you on images on my phone. Let me see if I can find. I'll search it real quick. Yeah, there we go. There's your boy, White Sands National Park. And the kiddos. Absolutely insane. This was us, actually. This is a video of us. The video's not low. Oh, yeah, there we go. Of us, driving. We had a little pit stop. Literally in the road. It's just white sand everywhere.
Carl's mission was to get to the bottom of a series of strange UAP-related events that had been plaguing the facility as of late. According to the personnel at the facility, they'd been hearing loud thuds somewhere in the mountains that ring the test range. And this coincided with the appearance of luminous UAPs, which were often actually tracked on radar. That's enough to make me need to sleep in my battle buddy's bunk at night. On the day in question, though, Lieutenant Carl, the intelligence officer, was surveying the mountains where the loud thuds in the UAPs had been heard and seen, likely looking for a point of origin where a foreign adversary might have been launching these exotic drones from. Lieutenant Carl's sworn statement says, quote, "After leaving the Jock, we flew a low-altitude nap of the Earth route through the mountain range for several hours. Multiple times, we spotted debris on the ground and descended for closer inspection. Each time, we determined it was remnants from rockets and other projectiles that had crashed during years of weapons testing."
That makes sense.
After several hours of searching for anything that could explain the orb-like sightings, the chopper ran low on fuel, and Lieutenant Carl had to make a decision to meet up with a tanker aircraft for a quick refueling. This tells us that he was probably using a Black Hawk helicopter equipped with a special refueling probe, possibly a Pave Hawk, and what that tells us is that his craft would have given him access to heavy-duty surveillance gear that's on board those. And it was
Not only that, it shows the higher up officials are willing to let him get a refill rather than come back to base. It's not like, oh, just come back to base. You've had enough out there. Like, they're taking this incredibly serious.
about to reveal a literal nightmare scenario that would have had me medically discharged for trauma. Because shortly after refueling, the local Joint Operations Center, the JOC, radioed in a request for the helicopter. Lieutenant Carl's helicopter was sent to investigate debris discovered by a ground team that was nearby, thinking it might offer a clue to the strange craft being observed at the test range. Lieutenant Carl's helicopter quickly was retasked even as the sun set, which forced them to use night vision and FLIR equipment to navigate according to them. But suddenly, the headquarters radioed with an immediate alert. Radar operators had just detected several strange objects just a few miles away from their position, objects that had mysteriously appeared in the same exact place that ground personnel had reported UFOs in the nights prior.
Weird.
Well, Lieutenant Carl states in his report, quote, "I relayed this to our pilots, and we altered course to intercept. As the helicopter raced to close in on the radar contacts, ground teams over there already started to report a UAP that was spotted with their FLIR thermal devices. The ground teams radioed in saying that the object was super hot, flying low to the ground, and moving east before abruptly changing course south at high speed. Then it seemingly disappeared. Upon arriving, the helicopter initiated a ground search, utilizing night vision, its FLIR, and just good old-fashioned the naked eye. After doing several passes, though, that nearby ground team radioed in a dire warning to Lieutenant Carl's helicopter and the crew. They said that the UAP had reappeared, and it had apparently dropped down to the ground upon the helicopter's arrival and remained out of sight. But it was now rising and shooting straight at the helicopter, according to the ground team. The UAP was described as stopping just 10 feet shy of turning the helicopter into a very expensive paperweight.
Holy
Then
shit.
it shot away at high speed from the pilot's point of view. Then the UAP split into two smaller objects before accelerating out of sight, according to the quote. At this point, the rest of this mission would have been a big nope for me. Just give me insurgents and IEDs in Iraq any day. But apparently made of sterner stuff than me. The helicopter crew and Lieutenant Carl, who had just nearly been smashed out of the sky by this UAP, decided to give chase. However, they were forced to give up when they couldn't match its speed.
Wow.
Sometime during the chase, the JOC, the headquarters radioed in that several fighter aircraft on the training mission had entered the range, and they were quickly retasked with pursuing and identifying this unknown object. Soon, they would have their own terrifying encounter. Meanwhile, though, the helicopter was reassigned to several more nearby radar detections. Arriving at a nearby mountain, Lieutenant Carl and his team and the helicopter settled into a hover about 700 feet above the ground, according to him, only for the world's most terrifying light show to start up right in front of them. According to Lieutenant Carl, our senior intelligence officer's statement, he and the helicopter crew observed countless orange orbs absolutely swarming the nearby mountain. The orbs put on their light show for several minutes in full view of the helicopter crew, and we have to assume that all of this was being recorded by the chopper's equipment. So somewhere buried deep in the Pentagon's black vault, they have classified high-definition video footage of all of this event. Presumably,
That pisses me off. Just release it. Like, if you're going to tell these stories, just release it. Because then, at the end of the day, let's, again, take aliens and UFOs out of this. The more eyes to see this footage, the more we're going to find out what it actually is, right? The more people will be able to investigate and be like, oh, I know what that is. And more scientists will be able to look at it. Keeping it hidden away, What's the point?
Though, as quickly as it started, it seemed to fade away, leaving the crew in stunned silence. But whatever was behind this phenomena wasn't done playing with them just yet. Almost as soon as the light show ended, the headquarters reported fresh radar hits again at a previous location where they'd almost been swatted out of the sky by the UAP. Upon arriving, they hovered again at about 700 feet altitude and watched as two large orbs, visible now by the naked eye, suddenly flared up just to the right of the helicopter, described as oval-shaped and orange with white or yellow center. The orbs emitted a bright light in all directions and seemingly had no identifying propulsion, because after a few seconds, according to the report, a third orb flared to life below them and then a fourth below it until they formed a T formation right behind the helicopter. So if you've been tracking the Pentagon UAP file releases, this probably sounds very familiar to you, because it's exactly what was reported in 1945 by American pilots over the skies of Europe during World War II.
Wow.
So the latest extreme close encounter proved unnerving enough that the pilots and Lieutenant Carl openly debated landing the aircraft for safety reasons. However, they reached deep for that last bit of hula motivation, and they opted instead to remain hovering. Then Lieutenant Carl said, quote, "We spotted the fighter jets entering visual range at 23,000 feet. Suddenly, the exact same orbs appeared right above the inbound fighters, perfectly matching the jet's speed and flight path, almost as if they could predict exactly where they were going."
What?
Lieutenant Carl in his report said that the strange lights then dimmed in reverse order of appearance, exactly like they had with the helicopter. They hounded the fighters until the last aircraft left the airspace and proceeded to land at a nearby airfield. According to the report, it appears...
Imagine getting out of them aircraft and everyone sitting there and being like, what the hell was that? Like, they've got to sit there and actually write a report on what they've seen. And they're probably writing it and thinking, what am I doing here? Have I got schizophrenia? Am I seeing things?
As if the lights were chasing the aircraft as they transited overhead, but with the fighters gone, the lights returned to their old plaything and soon were lighting up the helicopter again. For several minutes, the lights would flare up around the helicopter until at last the bizarre light show ended, with the lights forming a triangle shape and then dimming for good. Low on fuel, Lieutenant Carl and his helicopter returned back to the base and landed with their crew, trying to decipher what in the world or out of the world they'd just seen. Was it a threat display? An attempt to communicate? Because to me, the lights seem to be saying it's time to switch jobs and never go to that airfield again. That's theirs now. Sorry, air travel, we had a good ride, but this is one of the most high-profile incidents to ever be documented in official US government correspondence, at least that we know of. If such a bizarre and high-profile incident happened right under the noses of every single American, though, one has to wonder what other insane things the military might be hiding. One of the most disturbing and most credible accounts comes from a group of US Marines, local residents, and a British journalist who all came forward and spoke on the record with their full names to the New York Times about what they witnessed. In Helmand,
I swear, I know there's loads of wacky stories in Afghan. Like, you've got like the Kandahar Giant and all that other stuff, but some of them people swear by. And it's this world, I'm telling you right now, people who are like strict materialists and don't believe anything that, stories or anything like that. This world is way more bizarre than we can ever imagine. It's way weirder and way more magical than you could ever think. I'm telling you right now. I've seen weird shit. I did a whole video on the weird thing I saw when I was in Phoenix, Arizona, going for a run. If you haven't seen that, I'll link it somewhere. I saw something weird and I was scared to the core. And I still think about that nearly at least once a week minimum. But weird things happen. And I genuinely believe this world is way weirder than people think. And I'd love to know if you've had an experience. Let me know in the comments.
Province, one of the most bloody regions of the war in Afghanistan, a small group of US Marines were occupying a hilltop position, observing Taliban activity that was moving through the surrounding area in 2009. It was isolated and exposed. The hilltop defensive position that they were on was already ancient at the time, having been used in wars from the Soviet Union to when the British Empire was in Afghanistan. So the Marines who were first occupying it in 2008 discovered strange small tunnels leading into chambers beneath their mound on the outpost. But before they could fully understand what this underground
goblins. goblins in the tunnels. If you've not watched it on YouTube for free, you can watch a show called Hellier. Helier, I think it is, or AR. Go and watch it. It's brilliant.
Structure was they had engineers come in with demolition charges, blow it up, and collapse the tunnels.
Wow.
It was done as a safety precaution to make sure no one snuck in behind them and that no Taliban was able to flank them.
That makes
Local
sense.
residents later explained that these tunnels may have originated from a spiritual site and a burial ground from centuries ago, stretching back to ancient times before Alexander the Great's conquest through there.
Wow.
Shortly after arriving, the Marines started digging defensive positions. And almost immediately, they started uncovering human remains. It gets even stranger from there, because the U.S. Marines described bones being scattered throughout the ground beneath the outpost, according to local...
Okay, I've got another rant about this that is kind of a tangent rant. People like it when I rant. I believe places like Afghan, Iraq, all that area, Iran, that have had people in it for hundreds of thousands of years. And because we can't get archaeologists in there, there's going to be so many historical things in there that are just getting blown up because of the military. I think this is a prime example. This would have been probably a very historic thing that could have been the next, like, Göbekli Tepe or whatever it's called. Do you know what I mean? Like, it could be the next big thing, but we destroy it because there's wars there all the time. And that breaks my heart. There's someone who loves history. We could be discovering all sorts of stuff. Alexander the Great's tomb still not been found, you know?
Stories, the hill had been associated with death long before the American deployment ever arrived. Some accounts claim that it had served as a burial ground following earlier battles and massacres here in Afghanistan. The British troops that the U.S. Marines replaced gave them a strangely specific piece of advice as they were leaving to go back home. They said to the Marines that if they dug up anything, they needed to put it back in the ground where they found it, implying that it was cursed. But that's when the strange reports started happening. U.S. Marines standing watch in this outpost described hearing random footsteps moving throughout empty fighting positions. Others reported their radios filling with unexplained interference, or voices when nobody was even transmitting over the waves. Corporal Dutch Perkins and others claimed that they could hear men speaking Russian somewhere just beyond the perimeter. They felt like they weren't alone while standing watch. The outpost guard, known as Ugly Betty, started barking at apparently empty areas outside the position.
Oh my God.
But it got even stranger from there. The Marines also reported sudden temperature drops, the smell of decomposition, and unexplained flashes in the surrounding darkness that resembled distant muzzle fire, but were not followed by any actual shots. One of the most disturbing accounts involved the Marines scanning the terrain with night vision equipment, and one night, he reportedly saw what appeared to be a human figure approaching the outpost.
No.
The Marines switched from night vision to thermal imaging, but there was no heat signature in front of him. When he switched back to night vision, suddenly the figure had appeared to have moved significantly closer to him.
No.
What gives this story
No.
more credibility, though, I think, from an average barracks ghost tale, is that several Marines stationed at the same position later described overlapping experiences to New York Times journalists, including giving their own names, which sets it apart from the usual anonymous posts on the internet.
Yeah.
So, for instance, Marine Jose Herrera later described OP Rock as a possible conduit for paranormal activity. But there are also very reasonable explanations here. I think these Marines were operating in a combat zone under intense pressure, surviving on limited sleep, while constantly watching for enemy movement.
The other thing as well, like, is you don't know what material things are in the ground there. It could be something that lets off some sort of gas that gives hallucinations. That's a genuinely thing that could go wrong, right? Like, we don't know what was in that ground when it was disturbed. And so, yeah, like, you could have hallucinations. That's completely valid as well.
The psychological impact of discovering human remains under you could have contributed to all of this as well.
Yeah.
Because human perception is imperfect, even under the most normal of conditions.
That's true.
But I wasn't there, so who am I to pass judgment on the eyewitness accounts? What we do know is that these Marines believe they encountered something out there that they couldn't identify. But this is only the tip of the crazy iceberg, because things are about to get a lot weirder. Nuclear weapons are a magnet for the paranormal.
Are they going to talk about UFOs floating over nuclear facilities and disarming them? Because your boys already read the books. Your boys already been looking into that stuff.
You don't already know it. From UFOs to shadow beings and other things that go bump in the night, it seems the spooky world is absolutely obsessed with nuclear fission.
His book, Lou Alessandro's book, I can't remember what his new book's called. I've read it. It's good. It's really, really good. It's got the image on of like the classic Tic Tac video. It's got like red font, I'm pretty sure. Really, really good book. It's his newest one. I think it came out last year. Genuinely highly recommend you read it. I read it and also listened to it on audiobook when I was driving on a big trip. Cannot recommend it enough, especially if you've got a military mind, because he was in the CIA. He was in a couple different three-letter organizations, I'm pretty sure. And the way that he talks about how it's run is so true and so real that it's hard to like dismiss what he says. It's a really good book.
For some reason. There's such a big magnet that when he worked with Arrow, UFO whistleblower Luis Elizondo said that the organization had proposed creating a UFO trap by concentrating a bunch of nuclear assets in one area and then, I don't know, demasking them Scooby-Doo style? The US government was so concerned about UFOs that they were trying to lure them in, because the easiest way to catch a UFO, as we all know, is to build the universe's most radioactive bird feeder. The plan was to use an aircraft carrier because of its already large nuclear signature, thanks to its 2 nuclear reactors on board. The carrier could have then been loaded with nuclear bombs and accompanied by other nuclear assets like ballistic missiles and attack submarines. It would have been an end-of-the-world party to end all end-of-the-world parties. It would have been an Armageddon if literally anything went wrong. But sadly for those wanting to lure UFOs in close enough to, I guess, spring a net over them, the plan was considered but not approved. That likely had a lot to do with the fact that moving that much nuclear firepower into one location would have made certain adversarial nations like China, Russia, pretty nervous.
Yeah, you just can't do something like that, especially putting it on a ship and having it move about. You just can't do it. In the middle of the Arizona desert, it's home ground, home turf. But putting it on a ship, start sailing towards other nations with that much stuff on, you're going to get some eyebrows raised, aren't you?
I'm on pretty good terms with the United States myself, and it would have made me kind of nervous.
Yeah.
There's still plenty to investigate with nuclear power, though. Our next incident might be one of the most concerning that I could dig up about the UFO, Pentagon files, and nuclear power.
Can I just say, we've got 10 minutes left of this. Cappy Army covering UFOs. This is literally the best day ever. This is like Christmas for me. Chris, I don't know if he probably doesn't watch these videos, but if he does, Chris, if you watch this, or if anyone over at Cappy, because I think he's got a couple people, thank you so much. Thank you, because this is the best.
Because for decades, those who have worked with everything from nuclear missiles to nuclear power plants have reported the same eerie phenomena. From shadowy figures that seem to disappear when pursued and glowing balls of light. A lot like our first report earlier, but what happens when something biological penetrates one of the world's most restricted areas? In a 2025 News Nation interview with investigative journalist Ross Colbert, a former U.S. Air Force Security Forces patrolman recounts a hair-raising incident that happened at Nellis Air Force Base by 2 nuclear weapons storage depots, with a second witness confirmed by Colbert, who did not want to appear on camera. At the time of the incident, the facility's security personnel were undergoing a training exercise. In this specific scenario, the 30-man security element had to respond to a penetration alarm from inside of an empty training structure, prompting a large armed response. Upon arriving on scene, the assault force started to form up in anticipation of entering into the bunker to eliminate the simulated threat. But they were interrupted by a radio call from an Overwatch patrol, stating that they had been spotted by 2 individual heat signatures on their thermals in the desert in front of the training structure. The figures appeared to be humanoid in shape and laying flat on the ground.
What?
But with no perimeter penetration alarms or any other cause for concern, the unseen forces assumed that they were fellow flight members out there, picked to be bad guys and already part of this training exercise. With custody over nuclear weapons being priority to literally everything else, the 2 perps in the field were ignored to focus on assault and recovery operations. But then everything changed. Shortly after the warning radio call came in, the flight sergeant and senior-most security figure asked for the reporting patrol to repeat what they had observed. Once again, they relayed that they had eyes on 2 individuals that appeared to be laying prone, watching the exercise unfold in front of them, clearly visible on their handheld FLIR devices. The flight sergeant called for an immediate exercise termination and initiated a real-world security response at that point, indicating
Yeah, I'm not
that
surprised.
he hadn't put out any individuals out there. So what happened next would end up being reported all the way to the highest levels of the Pentagon and would result in one of the nation's most traumatic training events.
Oh my
Something
god.
or someone
my
had just
God.
penetrated into the world's largest above-ground nuclear weapons storage depot and had not set off a single alarm. The security personnel immediately formed into a sweep element with multiple M240 and M249 machine guns overwatching them. Whoever was out there was facing more firepower than some third world nations' entire militaries, and they'd given these American troops good reason to use it. As perimeter signs clearly state, once you pass the outer fence, deadly force is authorized. And when it comes to mysterious beings out there who only appear on thermal devices, it's preferred, really. The sweeping element uses a combination of night vision, FLIR, and good old-fashioned Mark I eyeballs, but failed to detect anything. It was only the overwatching machine gun team, with their elevated position, who could clearly see the two figures on their thermals, and they appeared to be responding to the sweep, closing in on them. As the element came closer and closer, the figures started moving backwards on their bellies, clearly showing signs that they were responding to the security personnel who were closing in on them. Whatever the figures were, they didn't want to get caught, and so they pulled off a vanishing act by disappearing right off the thermals that were trained on them. Once the sweeping element got to within a few meters of where the figures were, they evaded multiple surveillance devices. Baffled, the sweep pushed past the last known position to make sure that they weren't dealing with something that had just camouflaged its body heat and then repositioned. However, given the proximity of the troops to the last known position, it should have been impossible for anyone to run or crawl away.
That is creepy. That's shit that keeps you up at night. That's really, really creepy.
But other than confirming residual heat left on the ground by the sweep's own FLIR devices and some scuff marks that were apparent on the hard desert floor, the two mysterious figures had left with no other trace.
Get a flare up.
Somebody or something had just penetrated into what should have been the most secure place on Earth and disappeared without a trace. But this next story is just as bizarre. This jellyfish.
Where's he getting all these stories from? I love that he's getting all these stories. It's just going from one to the next one, and each one's getting more and more bizarre. This is better than Nuke's Top 5. This is sick.
Filmed in action somewhere close to Al-Tak Air Base in Iraq.
Oh, we've seen this. Yeah, we've seen that.
With the use of thermals,
I've seen
the
it.
Unknown object. It's captured in surprisingly high detail here, with numerous appendages visible in some of the sequences.
I could have sworn someone said it was just a balloon. Like they found a balloon on the internet that looks exactly like it.
The object is filmed for a whopping 17 minutes from an Air Force protection aerostat, and it silently hovers over the entire facility before continuing without incident. From its silent locomotion, no discernible means of propulsion, and enough appendages to make an octopus blush, the Iraqi jellyfish drone, which is not to be confused with the Iranian one, is...
It could just be a smear on the camera, though, as well, right?
...a big old nope for me. Skeptics have struck back, saying that the object was likely just a bunch of balloons tethered together, or simply a smudge on the camera. However, in the footage...
Exactly what I said. Chris, are you in this room? Are you reading my mind?
The object does not remain in the same spot on the camera, making it impossible to just be a smudge. And as far as party balloons, the lack of tumbling, cohesion, and no movement from the dangling appendages makes that very unlikely, as does the fact that the base personnel were apparently aware of multiple overflights of the jellyfish UFO, meaning this was not a one-time incident. There is a range on these odd pyramid and jellyfish objects being increasingly spotted by militaries and civilians. Digging into the historical record, though, it seems that these jellyfish UFOs are a relatively recent phenomena. They didn't appear in the known historical accounts until after the 2010s. What we do have are objects described as broadly jellyfish-shaped, but not with the same distinct presence of numerous appendages dangling below like a big old sky weirdo.
When you're saying about like historical stuff as well, like some of the best stuff about reading like historical UFO stuff or like alien encounters is by a guy called Jacques Vallée. If you've watched Close Encounters, he's like the French guy, and it is actually based on Jacques Vallée. And he wrote a book called Passport to Magnolia, I think it's called. And it basically says that like every culture has seen this stuff, but they've labeled it different stuff. Like the Irish would call it the Fae, right? Christians would call it angels and demons, etc. And loads of different cultures have names for these, what seem to be entities or objects that seem to like be around everywhere. Really, really good book.
The first flying jellyfish report comes from the crew of the Stratocruiser, who watched a large dark object accompanied by 6 smaller objects for nearly 20 minutes.
Interesting.
According
20
to the
minutes.
witnesses, the larger object seemed to be shape-shifting and described it as the shape of a jellyfish swimming through the water. The strongest visual parallel, though, comes from a Soviet-Russian TASS news report from 1977, which actually drew intense attention from CIA reports. So this TASS report says that at 0400 hours on September 22nd, 1977, the town of Petrozavodsk was awakened by the sudden appearance of a huge star suddenly flaring up in the sky. The star moved slowly toward the city and then spread its long tendrils out around it, showering the city with fine rays, which gave the appearance of kind of like rainfall.
Whoa.
Some have commented that the UFO could be a different type of biology that we don't understand, which might have made this rain fall from this UFO. The possibilities there are endless and disgusting, with all this biological rain coming from a UFO. But it was observed by dock workers and military personnel. The rays eventually ceased, and the object turned into a bright semicircle, according to them, and moved toward nearby Lake Onaga. The horizon was then shrouded in a gray cloud, which had a semicircle pool of bright light, red in the middle and white at the sides, forming its shape. After a total length of 10 to 12 minutes, the object disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind it no traces of its passing. According to the director of meteorological observation in the town, the event was inexplicable but impossible to deny. Due to the sheer number of witnesses and the widely dispersed location of the witnesses, it makes it impossible for this to have been some kind of mirage or hallucination. Whatever these jellyfish UFOs are, we can't rule out 2 possibilities. I think they're either an extremely exotic new form of UAV that entered service in the early 2010s, or they represent something non-human that either recently took on this appearance or could possibly be a new agent on the world stage. From the UFOs to something terrifying on the ground this time, an occurrence so gnarly, it spawned a full-blown...
The fact that he's got multiple stories here and not just one is brilliant. Like, his structure for this, I want him to do more of these, 100%.
FBI investigation. Because on April 24th, 1978, near a sensitive U.S. defense facility in New Mexico, rancher Manuel Gomez contacted the state police after finding his 11-month-old bull dead and mutilated. Mutilation came hot on the heels of a wave of similar cattle mutilations across the American South and Midwest. And the proximity to military and government contractor installations had made many people very suspicious of the government being involved.
So this is like very much like Skywalker Ranch type of thing. Is that what it's called? Skywalker? No. Is that, what was it called? What was the Skywalker? What am I talking about? Let me see. Skinwalker, not Skywalker. I'm such an idiot.
The horror show that they often discovered made it clear that regular animal predators didn't do this. The bull in question was found in the same condition that previous mutilations had been found in. A lack of blood around the mutilation site, and some of the organs were removed. It's gross, I'll put it that way. And it was done with impossibly sharp, precise instruments. But the body appeared to be significantly dehydrated, as if the bull's internal water permeating its tissues and organs had somehow been vacuumed and sucked away. 4 impressions were discovered about 100 feet from where the carcass was, as if a hovering craft had descended and rested on 4 separate landing legs. The possible landing impressions, however, were unusually deep given the very hard, very dry ground there, which gave investigators the idea that whatever this object must have been, it was extremely heavy. It also appears that part of the landing apparatus, or the object itself, had scraped along the ground as it landed or took off. Other than possible landing imprints, there were no tire tracks or footprints that were ever found anywhere near the carcass. Extensive bruising was discovered around one of the animal's legs, which gave Gomez the idea that a strap of some sort had been wrapped around it and used to lift the animal into the sky. But lassoing a bull by the leg while leaving no evidence on the ground is like playing the claw game with both eyes closed.
That's horrendous. Like, imagine how gruesome that is, even if, again, you take the UFO side out of it, the alien side of it. Think about how gruesome that is, like draining all of the liquids from this animal.
To show you how seriously the US government was taking this case, the animal's heart, samples from its muscles, and fragments of bones were sent to the Los Alamos National Laboratory.
Wow.
The same place where America basically invented the Fallout franchise in 1945. So Los Alamos reported nothing abnormal other than bacteria believed to have entered the body of the animal after death, with no conclusion useful in determining the animal's death there. Exactly what a laboratory might say, though, if they were trying to hide some secret cattle tests. Part of the animal were also sent to private labs, which curiously withheld their full findings unless sufficient evidence was gathered to prosecute any kind of responsible party. We talked to a modern-day academic working in a high-powered lab today, and she explained that this is speech intended to protect the private labs. So translated into everyday average infantryman talk, what the labs found was something anomalous. But unless the FBI was ready to slap the cuffs on someone, they weren't willing to publicly divulge what they had found. It was a move meant to basically protect the reputation of the lab and the discovery process. So strange and out of the ordinary that unless a culprit was discovered, the labs simply weren't willing to bear public ridicule for stating their results.
That is
exactly
weird.
the opposite of how science should work.
It is,
But the
yeah.
New Mexico State Police believed that the culprits had been very well financed, with access to advanced technology capable of sedating and airlifting cattle. An officer investigating the case believed that anticoagulants were likely administered to make it easier to do this to the animal's carcass. And some of the more
Wow.
inappropriate aspects of the bull's organs were removed with surgical tools, so the discovery of some light pink stains under the animal was theorized to have been the result of some kind of radiation weapon, or a radiation device of some kind.
What the actual hell? That is the weirdest thing ever. But why would even, like, a human want to do that? What would be the reason? Like, what is the... Like, I don't know if there's any benefit to that whatsoever. That's so weird.
With the radiation destroying the red blood cells and thus leaving the blood pink. No culprit was ever named, though, but the phenomena has not just occurred near sensitive national defense installations. It's also happened across civilian ranches all over the Midwest and American Southwest. This has been observed, and they continue to this day. So I'm not sure what I believe here. If these are adversarial technologies from China or Russia that we don't know about, that are more advanced and can do things that we're not familiar with, or if this is something underworldly, or just mistakes, accidentally seen signatures on radar screens that weren't really there. But if you found this video valuable, check out this video we have on some of the Pentagon's previous file dumps that are absolutely terrifying. I'm your average infantryman.
He's got
Chris
another
Cappy.
one?
See you in the next one.
I didn't know he had an older one. We might have to watch that. Let me know if you want me to watch that as well. There'll be a link down below to Cappy Army's videos. What do you think? Do you believe in aliens? Do you think the world's a little bit more magical than people expect? Because I do. I personally do. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Again, there'll be a link down below to Cappy Army. Go give him a subscribe. Check out Chug if you haven't already. And check out Morale My Business as well. Other than that, I love you all. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.